Working on a Volkswagen 2014 Golf GTI 2-liter turbo. Brought to me from another shop for checking like rough running, misfiring, condition. They did believe, from what I understood, was told, they replaced the high pressure fuel pump and did not make a difference. Couldn't figure out from there. They stopped, sent it over here, and asked me to see what I could find with it. So first things first, I just want to get you a shot of, I'll show you how it runs, of what it sounds like. And it's pretty rough running, right off the bat. Runs pretty runs pretty crappy. There is a O2 sensor heater code, not too concerned. There's this intake manifold, runner position sensor code, but the one that stands out to me, or that I would be concerned with, is basically this correlation cam crank, which would state, or is saying, that there's something wrong with the timing. So the way I'm going to check timing is through the scope. I'm going to graph the cam crank signals, the patterns, compare them to a known good, which luckily I do have from this same engine vehicle there, and I will compare the two and verify that timing is truly off. I'll restart there, go ahead and crank it for a few, be able to get a good reading. See, the blue trace is the cam, the gold / yellow, whatever, is the crank. Okay, so this is a saved capture that I took a long time ago. It's got more inputs logged in with it, but it has the two main ones that we are concerned with, which is the same blue trace and the gold trace, which is cam and crank. Red is the in-cylinder of number 1, and green is the ignition. Where on this particular situation, we're not too concerned with those right now to compare timing. A couple of areas I want to concentrate on and compare with the other one. Two spots I want to use for comparison is going to be, well, you can see you've got two wide teeth, it's hard to tell, and then two small teeth, and then it starts over. So on the leading edge here of the second, well, depends, leading or trailing, but this upright on this second large tooth is the first cursor, and it falls pretty much the bottom peak of the first trace, or first tooth signal on the bottom side of the CKP. The second area that I will use is the first small tooth, the side, the trace going down. I'll put a cursor on that and count the teeth from the gap over to the left, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7, say 7 or just after the 7th tooth from the gap over to the left. 2 good reference points that we can easily find and try to mark on the other waveform. You got this first upright on the second big tooth, cursor there. It is way off to the left. It should be lining up here at this point. And then this trace going downward on the first small tooth, like I said, was about 7 teeth over. And we're all the way, further off to the left. So that is the timing being incorrect, which would relate to the trouble code we're getting, and would definitely make an engine run poorly. And that's what I believe is going on with this one. We're definitely out of time for sure. We'll definitely need to address this with the customer. Let him know that I recommend doing the timing, setting that correctly first, and then also looking into the intake manifold codes. Okay, so got this put all back together and got it running, and this is where things get interesting. Things go bad, your night gets crappy, you know you're not going home, you found something interesting, and you get slapped across the face with something you did not see coming. Now I'm talking about reassembled, put back together, replaced bad components, screen on this. The bores in here for the camshafts were actually kind of messed up, weren't even going in correctly. But all that doesn't matter. Decided to do an aftershot of the cam crank signal, like I did before, from the same points during cranking. And there's a picture of it. Look at this point here, and this is the before shot. Same distance from here to here, same here to here. Obviously, beforehand, you just automatically assume by this, from looking at known goods, that your timing's off. Redo your timing, put it back together, crank it, same thing. After knowing that having physical timing set correctly, per instructions, all tools, and all that. Start up in the same exact waveform as far as their correlation, their positions in relation to each other. So you start thinking, and just my mind going, if cam crank with that off, you would have very bad in-cylinder pressure readings. And so it got me thinking. I said, let me hook up a transducer number 1, take a look and see what that's even looking like, if it's looking semi-normal or what the heck. And luckily, months ago, when I had that vehicle in here, at that time I took the cam crank and number 1 cylinder pressure transducer just to be able to have a known good. And so I wanted to do that, and I did that one during cranking, so I was going to do this and look and see where the cylinder pressures and stuff were, just to see if we are really physically off, or if we really physically were off, why is it not running worse than it is? Or we should see something in the transducer that would correlate with your cam being quote unquote so off. Already took my waveform, same exact as what I did on that last one. I took a amperage to look and see when we have spark in relation to number 1 TDC during cranking, and then we have your cam crank. So I'll pull up the known good, and then I'll get you a shot of both of them. See what the heck the pressures are looking like, or if they look the same, or what. Okay, here's a shot of the known good. Next thing to look at, and at this point we don't really care about the cam signal and where that's at. What I'm worried about or concerned or want to look at is my TDC point in relation to my crank trigger, and where that's pretty much landing. And just quick visually, here's TDC from the red trace, and obviously just use this gap as reference point, and then you can use this gap and this TDC, and they look similar, and even the transducer readings pretty close also. And also your firing point of your of the coil, the trigger, looks very similar also, which is the green trace, the amperage. What I'll do is get some actual readings. So putting up my rulers, that'll give me my 720 degrees from TDC to TDC. And we are still on the known good. And what I'm going to do is take 2 measurements. I could do 1, 2 just to overkill, which is not going to make any difference front to back. So I'll just do 1. I'll go from this TDC line to an easy identifiable high peak right there where the gap is, and we'll just take the reading in degrees and compare it to the supposed off time, Okay, you can see this cursor here, and the point where that's at is 625. And just to get you actual degree difference, obviously you can do some math. And the difference is at 94 and change. So that's from that point to the TDC mark. What we'll do next is we'll set up this supposed bad timing one. And I'm calling it supposed because it's coming up, the waveform's coming up bad timing, but TDC points in relation to crank sensor is looking to be about the same. Okay, so here's our degree setup, 0 to 720, and again I'll go from this high peak of the gap to the TDC. And keep in mind, this is all relative to where I'm putting my cursors and rulers. But there you go. 625. It should be. $94 and change. Okay, so this is where, along with being already puzzled, where you just start thinking, asking yourself questions. And I'm starting to suspect and this is just, a hypothesis at this point, because I don't know what the heck's going on. But I'm wondering if this trigger wheel is one of those kind of pressed on to the camshaft, and if for somehow reason it rotated its position on the camshaft, which would give it a different location, which would then, once it rotates past the sensor, would graph the waveform and put the teeth in a different position as opposed to where it should if it was in the correct position, which then would align this incorrectly. As far as physically the cam itself being in the correct physical position, I would 100% say that it is, for various reasons. Number one, the way that it runs. Number two, the way that this in-cylinder pressure transducer graph comes up, as far as building up the pressure and when it builds the pressure, and verifying the position of TDC with the crank sensor signal. So as far as the lobes opening and closing in the correct timing of the valves opening and closing at the correct time as how they should per the lobes, I believe that's 100% correct. So I am almost wondering or betting or curious about, is that trigger wheel on the cam? Which is something I personally have never seen yet. I guess there's a first time for everything. And at this point, I'm almost hoping that that's what it is, because there's nothing else that it could be it. And if it, well, I'm not even going to say if it's not it, because I don't even want to get to that point. Wanted to show you, because I was just curious, just kept thinking about it. I just wanted to measure the point where the coil fires in relation to TDC, and I've got the ruler and cursor there. Cursor is on the where the coil turns off and ignites or sparks, and the relation point to that is 8 degrees before top dead center, or 8.8, almost 9, I guess, as far as this one is shown. And this is the known good one because of where this bottom section is in relation to that gap. And not that. The same measurement on the supposed bad one is 8 and change. Again, pretty much dead on. Wanted to get, just for curiosity, so I was looking online, and some sources say that you can look at live data on the measuring valve block channel 93, which that is supposedly used for inspection of the timing chain. I guess people use it to see if you're starting to have a chain stretch, and you'll look at this phase position bank 1 intake value in degrees, and if you're at about 4 or 5 degrees, they tell you, or it's said that you have chain stretch. I would almost tend to think that it's also basically time. It's going to be, well, it's obviously timing related. If your chain is stretching, your timing is going to start to go off. So I wanted to pull this up and see what it read with what the cam sensor input that we currently have, which is the bad, which is in the incorrect position. So, got the key on. I'm going to crank it up. I've got all coils in, so all 4 cylinders will be contributing. And you know, it's running rough like it has been. We're idling, and it's staying put at 0 degrees, which when I first looked at it just before turning the camera on, it kind of threw me off, or basically floored me again, like, with this vehicle. We know we're having a bad timing input present, and when people say this is a value used to check for a stretched chain, it would be because the chain is throwing the timing off, and on those vehicles you'll get a high reading. In this one, where we know we have supposedly cam crank correlation issue, it's the reading here is 0 degrees. Now I don't know 100% where this is derived from. That would probably help identify why the values come up when they do, and you know what values come up when they do. So just another thing I wanted to look at, known type of situation we have going on, and as far as this is showing, it's staying put at 0 degrees. Gotten a little bit desperate and needing to know what's going on, and I need to verify and make sure and see if it truly is the camshaft. So we're temporarily sacrificing the Jetta. Here's the cam that ended up coming out of the Jetta. When taking these apart, I was concerned with the trigger wheel on the camshaft having shifted, which then I wanted to compare a known good with the one out of the GTI. So I took them out, I had them both side by side, tried to do as many comparisons that I could, and just trying to make markings as accurate as I could, and try to pick reference points. And so I had laid them up facing this way, with this lobe being, since it would lay flat that way and would keep it at a good stable position. So I used this lobe, and it would be sitting there, and then I just came up here and try to pick a reference point, which was this tip of the tooth. And as best as I could, on the top angle there, where you see it near the 28 marking on that tooth, it was as best as I can do to get a good comparison between the two. And that was the first measurement. So then I would rotate this to have the lobe be flat. Now on this side, it would kind of rock, so there was it wouldn't sit this way, but if you let it stabilize, it sat straight there. And same deal with this level. Pick this edge here, which was it's hard to tell through the camera, around the 27, 28. Both were the same on that. And then I actually then just went over on this side and picked the reading for the top edge there. Hard to do this, but both lined up pretty much dead on, which then obviously throws more of a curve into the whole situation. And I wasn't confident then that the camshaft itself was bad, and obviously that this had shifted. It then was not possible. I started considering possibly the variable gear being shifted or locked or something in a different position, but I still wasn't really too keen on that because of how it's set up and ends up lining up with timing. And then I just compared to both of them, this variable gear, and I first looked at this where the gear splits, and both of these lined up the same way on both gears. So I knew that the part that would adjust was not full, locked in a traveled position, and not in its neutral state. I even went a little bit further and was trying to inspect, and you can see the two-piece part, this face, and then the inner portion, that shiny ring in there, where you can tell where rotation occurs, and there's that dot. It kind of sits in the middle of that gapped area, and it sat in the same position for both cams. I even went a little bit further, took another kind of reference, and it's kind of hard to tell, but in here there's a gap, and both gears had that same gap, same distance, same everything, along with that being positioned in the same spot, and this marking in the same spot. So I knew that the variable gear itself was not an issue or locked in an advanced or retarded position. So when I ended up standing both cams upright like this. The one out of the GTI kind of bounced back on me and didn't fully sit flat, so I laid it down, and this had popped out from the center hole here, the hollow point. And then this fell out. And I, at that point, did not know 100% where that came from. And I just compared the oil control valve out of the GTI and the one out of the Jetta. And the one out of the Jetta had this little like cap. It was sitting inside, clipped in on the valve, and the spring was on the inside of it. So the way it goes is look like that. So the end of the oil control valve, the Jetta, looked like that, but the cap was actually clipped into position. And that's where that had come from. Reason why I guess I just didn't notice or pay attention, because when you unscrew this out of the cam and you pull it out, you're still horizontal, and then you go and just lay it down like that, or that's what I did. Maybe if I would have thrown it and I would have seen the valve fully come out, maybe I would have started questioning. But even then, at that point, without having a known good one really, or seen enough of them, or just not even look at it, I never would have thought about it, because I did, obviously I looked at it and didn't notice anything. Went back to install it, put it in, and that's why I missed these little guys. And so what I ended up doing, or deciding to go with, was put the original cam out of the GTI back in it, and put the oil control valve from the Jetta into the GTI. Once also I started thinking about if it was a oil control valve possibility, after physically looking at the valve and seeing how it had come apart, and with just questioning the whole fact about low oil pressure during cranking, and could it really change the position of the cam or whatnot. So what I thought about real quick was to go back to the waveforms that I recorded when it was in a out of time state. And what I wanted to do, and obviously I didn't pay attention, had no idea to look for this, but what I wanted to do was take a look at the cam signal from and this is the complete capture, to take look at the cam signal from the very beginning, from where it starts cranking, and then start comparing it down the line towards the end, and to see if at any point there was a shift, like if it started correct position and then all of a sudden moved to the what I believe is the advanced state, or just anything. Like I said, I just wanted to see if the cam signal shifted at all from the beginning of the cranking to the middle or end towards the end. And this capture here is after I did the timing. Main thing I wanted to look at was the cam signal, and I picked 2 reference points that I will point out to you. And just to show, this is the beginning of the graph where both signals are just dead, and the crank starts rotating, and speeding up as as the signal grows. So this is the beginning of the cranking. Blue's obviously the cam, and the 2 points that I'm gonna use and show you guys on the cam sensor is on the second small tooth, which is this guy here, and the second big tooth, which is right here. Both rising edges of the second small tooth and the second large tooth. So we're gonna look at this rising edge here and this rising edge here throughout the capture. And as you can see, it's this one crosses on the crank right dead on the third tooth. And then I'll get you a count for the the third tooth to the right from the gap. So 1, 2, 3. And then for the second big tooth on this rising edge, you go from the gap to the left, and you count the teeth, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's right on the 11th tooth. So both are dead on intersecting teeth, and it's 3 and 11. So if you scroll over to the very next same point, which is here, here's the gap, and here's the rising edge, and you can already see it's kind of hard to tell, but this is already shifted. The cam is shifted towards the right off of the perfect alignment with that tooth. And this one, it's still in the same spot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And so keep scrolling again to the same two teeth, or same 2 points. And here again, this one is shifting more towards the right off of that third tooth. And look here what this one starts to do, and it's shifting towards the left off of this 11th tooth. See, you can clearly start to see that tooth. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and after the 11th tooth towards the left is the rising edge. So already you're starting to see a shifting point. And I won't go through all of them. See if I could find. So here, it's pretty much in the middle between the third and fourth tooth. And this one, it's creeping over to the 12th tooth. And let's see if we can and this one, it almost looks like it started to shift back towards the left, towards the third tooth, but it's still not identically on top of it. It's off from what we started. What's even crazier, look at where this one now falls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's now dead on the 12th tooth from the left, to the left from the gap. So right there, I knew right away that there's a shifting of the cam signal that should not occur. And not to bore you guys and show you too many captures or whatever, I ended up pulling the known good from that one, pulled that up, and from the very beginning of a cranking towards the middle or whatnot towards the end, I compared the cam signal starting point and of the same two teeth, counted them, and then shifted over down, and it stayed in the very same spot. So right there and then is when I decided to stay and use the same original cam, but then install and insert the known good oil control valve, because there's obviously oiling issues, controlling of the variable system to, to where it starts in the wrong position, and it even shifting very slightly where there should be absolutely no shifting at all. And obviously, I was not looking at that when I first took this capture to see if the vehicle was in time or not. Never would have thought to look for that. But because simply, I was just looking at this point and seeing that it was way towards the left of the gap, and just always looked here, and compared it to a known good one. The good one was lining up somewhere in this area. So when you see something that far off, you're not gonna try to dissect it from beginning of cranking towards the middle and whatnot. But once I started seeing all that crap with the oil control valve, I decided to come here and look at it, and I ended up finding that it does shift. It does not end where it started. There's a shift when there shouldn't be, and all that good stuff. So that's how I knew that that's where there was an issue for sure. Whether it was gonna magically make it start off all the way this way, I did not know, which is why I assembled it the way I did, kind of, excuse my language, but half-assed, just to see if it works. And then got that cranking, no start, and took a capture. So I'll pull that one up. And here is the basically final capture that I'll probably end up pulling up and showing. This is after timing, after installing a known good oil control valve, and this is the beginning point, just like the other capture I just showed you. So from the beginning of cranking, and we can use the same 2 points to compare. And we could start right here. So this is the second small tooth, this is the second big tooth, and right away, without even counting if there's a shift or not, I knew right away that that was the problem, because the main point where I was looking at beforehand had shifted all the way over to line up to where the known good from the Jetta had lined up also. So right then and there, I knew that that was the problem, the oil control valve, because of having it shift so much over just from the initial first crank and continuing on. That's where I confirmed that's what was causing the timing issue all along. One I probably never would have found if I never would have taken the cams out to compare, thinking that it was a trigger wheel issue. But I never seen this before. I believe I got lucky that I went as far as taking the cam out, flipping them upright, and having that spring pop out and fall out, and being able to dissect the known bad waveform and actually seeing a shifting of the cam signal when there should be absolutely no shifting. So definitely spent a lot of time on this, hours and hours and hours, and this is time he'll never get back, and I can't. There's no way to charge this to the customer, especially like I said, practically my #1 customer. Really, really good to me, which is partially why I went to the extent of why I did to get this fixed. Is to get him a fixed car. This vehicle, he bought it at auction. It was probably sold because of not being able to be fixed, and they themselves tried, little things here and there. I believe, I think it was like you said, fuel pump and plugs and stuff like that. But it's fixed now. We know what the problem is. We physically see it on the scope. Kind of just rambling on because I spent so much time on this, and kind of just glad to finally get this one figured out. Plan for now is to, unfortunately or fortunately, take it all back apart, clean up all the sealing surfaces, reseal it, put it back together, and clear all the codes and get it on its way towards the customer. So, hope you guys definitely enjoyed this one. As much as I did. As much as I didn't, I did, because it's another fixed one, and definitely a cool one. It's not your typical timing code. Oh, it needs timing change. No, not on this one. So, hope you liked it, and that's it for now.